Valve blessed us with a new patch this month, tweaking almost every heroes and adjusting a lot of items and systems. In this video, we'll focus on the heroes changes so you can quickly see what's modified for your favorite characters, or maybe even the ones you really don't like facing. Side note, how dare you call this a small update, Valve? Sorry for the delay on getting this video out, guys, but it was a lot to ingest. Let's kick things off with Abrams. Infernal Resilience, his third spell and passive, now grants the HP bonus at tier 1 instead of tier 2, giving more tankiness earlier but removing the passive HP regen effect. At tier 2 though, Abrams gets 18% melee lifesteal against heroes, with 40% effectiveness against monsters and minions. His ult is also getting buffed with a slight duration increase on the upgrades to the stun at tier 2 and unstoppable effect at tier 3. Abrams should overall feel beefier than before throughout the game, with an emphasis on fighting instead of passively regenerating between fights. Apollo. The Ixian will be easier to hit by his enemies with a new hitbox that is more accurate to the model and got the regen nerfed by 1 unit. His second spell, Riposte, is getting a pretty substantial rework. It doesn't trigger an automatic dash anymore, instead getting replaced by a secondary ability, allowing Apollo to target a hero to jump to after riposting with a decent range of 25 meters. Not that you can buffer it pre-parry. Riposte will also not be triggered by damage auras like Infernus's Flame Dash, or by objective damages. His third spell, Flawless Advance, also got a slight nerf with a reduced hitbox. Hard to say exactly how those changes will affect Apollo, but Riposte feels like it will bring more options with a targeted dash and less random triggers from low damage abilities like auras. The hitbox nerf and regen reduction should make Apollo less aggressive and force you to pick smart plays before jumping into the fray. Bebop. Valve decided to refocus our favorite scrap golem on bombs. Less scaling on the bullet damage throughout the game, slightly less damage on the uppercut from the tier 2 upgrade, but to make up for it, a flat increase on the tier 2 upgrade for the sticky bomb. Rushing tier 2 bombs pretty early should feel like it packs more of a punch, unlike the actual punch. Anyways, Billy! The goat is getting tankier but less lethal, with more health per boon, but less bullet damage per boon. His charge ability, Rising Ram, is also getting a slight cooldown increase balanced by a longer charge duration at tier 2 and stronger cooldown reduction at tier 3. Early game, Billy will need to be smarter when deciding to charge in, but will get HP and cooldown reduction back later on to charge in every fight, like the Hidden King intended. Calico. Calico is getting a simple change on her first ability tier 2 upgrade, Gloom Bomb. Instead of blowing up barriers, she instead reduces the melee resist per hit bomb, making her second ability and melee attacks way stronger. I'm not a Calico player, but it feels like a buff overall, making the tier 2 upgrade more useful against any hero, not just barriers, and making her combo even more defined. Celeste. The unicorn is getting the Apollo treatment with a hitbox improvement, making her easier to hit, along with a slight mobility nerf by increasing the cooldown to regen a stamina pip. To make up for it though, the tier 2 upgrade on her third spell is getting a buff with improved cooldown reduction and damage increase. Her ult also gets a tier 2 buff by adding more flat damage. Basically less survivability throughout the game, but stronger damage from mid-game. Doorman. The call bell will be harder to hit with a lower radius from the get-go, but balancing out at tier 3 to the usual 10-meter radius, and it won't hit as hard with a reduced spirit scaling. The inaccuracy debuff applied by the bell will also be weaker, from 100% to 40%, but last over the full 4-second debuff duration instead of a diminishing 100 to 0% over 1 second. The door is getting a slight nerf, as Doorman won't be able to quickly open and close it instantly to get a quick escape. Enemies will be able to follow you now. The silence debuff is now also affecting the door placement. The recent bug affecting an interaction between the luggage cart and Dispel has also been fixed. It overall feels like a pretty big nerf for Doorman, especially early game with the call bell overhaul and doorways nerf. Drifter. Her favorite Cajun vampire gets a tweak on his first ability, Rend. The tier 3 upgrade will now instead scale on heavy melee damage. Melee Drifter builds are already sprouting up to take this into account. It will be interesting to see how this change affects Drifter. Professor Dynamo. The teacher is getting a nerf with his first spell, Kinetic Pulse, getting lower spirit scaling and tier 2 upgrade to the bullet resistance debuff it applies. His second spell, Quantum Entanglement tier 3 upgrade, also no longer dispels debuffs but only reduces the duration by 50%. Graves. Valve apparently decided to rework Graves entirely with half of the patch note being about her. Okay, let's get started. First, Graves will zoom around the map with a substantial sprint speed increase. Her second spell, Grasping Hands, now spawns a ghoul on the line it creates even without upgrades. Tier 3 upgrade still increases the number of ghouls by 1. The Deadheads, the little skulls spawned by her first spell, Jar of Dead, got some fixes and tweaks to their dash range, fire rate, ability to dash through veils, attack range in follow mode, and damage fall-off not being applied properly when attacking them. They also got a slight buffer when losing line of sight before giving up on following an enemy, and will not become inactive anymore when Graves dies. The little skulls will be better at following her outside of combat with a speed and acceleration increase. They also will not block certain projectiles, no more shielding the team from Great Talon's bird. Graves can now melee attack an enemy to set them as priority target for the Deadheads. Full transparency, I do not play this character at all, but it feels like the Deadheads should overall feel more responsive and consistent in their behaviors. To balance the buffs those changes provide, the spirit scaling on Jar of Dead got slightly nerfed. She also got a pretty big nerf to her bullet damage and damage growth, balancing out the now smarter and stronger Deadheads and free early game ghoul. Talking about Great Talon, he is getting a big amount of changes to Rain of Arrows, his movement ability. A buff to the cooldown, reduced by a whopping 8 seconds, and to the cast time, balances out the nerf to the duration that has been almost halved. While he'll be staying up in the air for a shorter time, his mobility has been greatly improved, along with a longer dash distance mid-air, making him less of a flying sitting duck. The base bonus to weapon damage provided by the ability got slightly nerfed. His tier 1 and tier 2 upgrade has been swapped out, with a slight tweak to values. Overall, Great Talon should have a tighter but stronger burst window in early game. Haze. Haze gets a simple buff to her third spell and passive, Fixation, dealing a bit more damage with her weapon per stacks applied. Holliday. The Sheriff is getting a simple base bullet damage and health regen buff. Nice. Infernus. Our favorite bartender will have an easier time shooting with a buff to his bullet size. His ult ability tier 3 upgrade provides a slightly longer stun duration as well. Kelvin. His first ability, Frost Grenade, and his third ability, Arctic Beam, are getting a base spirit scaling nerf. Maybe more importantly, and to the joy of Kelvin haters, Kelvin will now stop generating terrain with Ice Path when interrupted during the cast, making him fall down to the ground. No more slippery undead shenanigans. Lash. The Stevedore is getting a nerf to the bullet damage per boon, but his first ability, Ground Strike, is getting a buff to the scaling based on distance traveled. His second ability is also getting tweaked. Grapple tier 2 upgrade no longer stacks the damage buff with itself, but instead refreshes its duration, and the tier 3 upgrade now grants 1 charge along with the existing stamina and air control buff. McGinnis. The war criminal got even scarier. More bullet damage per boon and more radius on her heal zone, Medicinal Spectre. Valve also fixed a bug on her ult, which used to not trigger the barrier and spirit power buff provided by Diviner's Kevlar. Mina. The vampire now suffers a 8% debuff resist nerf to her base stats, no longer applies on hit damage to abilities with love bites, and gets reduced damage based on current HP with her ult tier 3 upgrade. On the buff side, the tier 3 upgrade to Love Bites gets better cooldown reduction, and a niche bug has been fixed with her first ability, Rake, not working on high ping. Mirage. The Jin's mark visuals are now shown as little stick counters instead of a numeral mark. Not sure about this one, Valve, but I'd love to get the input of Mirage players on this one. Does it increase readability mid-game for you guys? Mo&Krill. Their third ability, Sand Blast, is getting a substantial buff to the duration. Also, feels like a bug fix, but getting hit by a melee attack while burrowed won't knock you up anymore. Paige. The Bookworm got a Bookworm buff, her first ability, with the tier 2 upgrade providing increased cooldown reduction. Her ult ability is getting a buff to the damage with the tier 3 upgrade. When whiffing the rallying charge, you'll be refunded half of the cooldown to make up for the shame of what just happened. Paradox, a bunch of buffs for our favorite time-bending thief. Her second ability, Time World, is getting value tweaks at each upgrade stage. Tier 1 provides even more duration, Tier 2 provides even more charges, and Tier 3 allows you to get your charges back even faster. Her third ability, Kinetic Carbine, gets more max damage scaling when unlocking the Tier 3 upgrade. Finally, her ult is getting a flat damage increase. I'm slightly scared to encounter a Paradox in game now, I'll be honest. Pocket. Pocket is getting a pretty strong nerf to their kit. Their second ability, Flying Cloak, gets less duration on the weapon damage buff provided by the tier 2 upgrade. The Yield ability is also getting a substantial nerf to the cooldown, with 10 seconds added on top of the previous 140 second cooldown. Rem, my favorite little guy, is getting a lot of changes, mostly to the tag-along ability, but first, the Bricked Fill Pilotos ability is getting a buff to charge time and to the tier 3 flat damage upgrade, even more bricks. Tag-along now applies a burst heals to every ally you jump to, heals faster, gets a buff on item effectiveness unlocked by tier 2, and gets better missing health heals at tier 3. The ability also can now be cast through veils and gets a way shorter lockout after ejecting. Along with those changes, Rem will be able to fly faster between allies, can be affected by friendly auras, and gets a new heal duration indicator on the HUD. Note that some abilities and items that could very rudely kill Rem while he's taking a nap got fixed. Finally, for the eject, it's no longer affected by debuff resistance and gets an upward trajectory to avoid bonking the ground with Rem's soft head, with better mobility and input controls too. But we're not done yet. Rem's ult, Nap Time, provides 30% damage reduction from the get-go, with the tier 3 upgrade untouched. Okay, side note, since I'm a Rem main, what the actual fuck, Valve? I get that tag-along felt slightly underwhelming and clunky to use at time, but I feel like Rem was already slightly overpowered, especially with all the funky builds that the character allows you to use. I'm expecting a wave of nerfs on the next patch, but I guess we'll see how the meta shifts with all the changes this patch. Not complaining, but very surprised. 7. A simple bullet damage growth nerf and survivability increase, with 7 taking less damage from headshots critical hits. Shiv. His second ability, Slice and Dice, is getting a nerf on the Spirit Resist debuff provided by the tier 2 upgrade. His third ability, Bloodletting, is getting a base deferred damage cleared value nerf, balanced out by a tier 3 deferred damage cleared value buff, overall balancing out in late game. His ult is getting a base nerf on the cooldown and full rage damage bonus, balanced out by a buff on his tier 2 upgrade to the full rage damage bonus, and also now providing a pretty big cooldown reduction buff, making the ability stronger later in the game. Silva. The Wolf Girl is getting an adjustment to her bullet cycle timer being shorter, with the overall DPS adjusted to remain the same. Her gun basically shoots faster, but deals less damage. Her third ability, Entangling Bola, no longer prevents enemies from jumping or mantling. The tier 2 and 3 upgrades also got tweaked, with tier 2 now reducing cooldown instead of buffing duration, and tier 3 no longer reducing cooldown but buffing the duration and buffing ricochet to hit more targets. Her ult got a nerf to the fire rate, balanced out by a stronger spirit scaling. Venator. A bunch of buffs for the Irish Priest. Venator will be tankier with more base health and health per boon scaling. His third spell, Hex-Lined Snaptrap, gets a buff on the tier 3 upgrade with more damage against revealed targets, and now also granting an additional charge. Victor. Victor will deal less base and scaling bullet damage, but increased spirit scaling on jumpstart at tier 3, his second ability. Note that his third spell, Aura of Suffering, now does 50% damage to objectives. Viscous. Puddle Punch is getting some tweaks, now increasing damage at tier 1, but no longer doing so at tier 2. Overall, a slight nerf on damage, but getting the bonus earlier. His tier 2 instead provides 40% lifesteal, with 25% effectiveness against creeps and monsters. Vyper. The snake's first ability, Screwjab Dagger, is getting a buff to her tier 2 bullet resist debuff, and a bigger max stacks amount on tier 3. Overall, a substantial buff to her late game. Warden. Warden is getting a pretty big nerf, with bullet damage scaling per boon getting slightly reduced, and a Binding Ward, his third ability, no longer getting an increase to the range at tier 2, but the duration buff is untouched. On the bright side, his second ability, Willpower tier 3 upgrade, now retroactively applies the debuff resistance to existing debuffs, instead of only applying to the one received after casting the ability. Overall, less damage, but better survivability. And finally, Yamato. Her first ability, Power Slash, is getting buffed with a post-cast time lockout reduction and better spirit scaling. Her second ability, Flying Slash, is also getting tweaked with a base range increase balanced out by moving the range increase to tier 3 at a reduced rate. The tier 3 upgrade also gets an additional charge now. Her Yield tier 1 upgrade also gets a slight buff to weapon damage. Finally, Crimson Slash, her third ability, is getting a quality of life fix, allowing you to hit even if aiming too high or too low. This wraps up the update on the hero's tweaks side. What do you think of the changes, and are you going to permaban Rem now? Please don't. I'll see you guys in the Cursed Apple to test out the new changes. Until then...
I'll see